Hey, Stone Cousins. You already know what time it is. Animated horror stories. Animated horror stories. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. We at DSA House. DSA Dark Knight Animations. Soon I'm gonna be trying to, I'm gonna merge them, have them have their own day. Now I'm just like, y'all could be partnered with somebody else for right now. Y'all's a lot to take on by yourself. And truth be told, I still might have them have their own day, but I still might have them be partnered with somebody else so they could still be watched with somebody else. So you could, if it is heavy on your heart, you know, you could just, you know, watch the other video. I don't know what's going on in this one, but I'm gonna just say it might have a trigger warning. So if we get to a part where it have a trigger warning, a emotional warning, anything to make you feel uncomfortable, please just leave them out of there. Um, and I'm just saying heads up because I don't know. I don't watch these videos without y'all. We watch these together. So I say that because the last time they had an the sexual assault scene, and it was just heavy on my heart, made my stomach hurt. I wasn't expecting it. They didn't give us no warning at the beginning, so I'm just giving y'all a warning. We don't know what they be doing over here. We knew over here. So we just got to be prepared. So keep y'all blunts ready, okay? And on that note, grab a blunt, please. Grab a bottle of water, grab a bag of chips, and grab a blanket. And as I always say, if you want to go over to their channel and subscribe, and enjoy the videos by your lonesome, feel free. Like I said, we new over here, so they got a lot of stuff that you can watch by yourself. But feel free to watch it with us as well. I'll be watching. So let's get up into it, y'all. Three true Uber horror stories animated. I don't know what we did last time, but it was crazy. I think we did like Stalkers the Best Friends one, and we doing true Uber.
This incident happened to my best friend about 3 years ago. She
Mm,
was 19 back then and was working with an international company for client dealing processes. I don't have a whole lot of information about her work, but
okay.
the one thing I know was that she was getting more than enough for her work. So let us begin
Hey,
her
hey,
story.
well.
She was doing her regular work in her office when she got a call from her old school friend. Her
Mhm.
friend invited her to a reunion party that was being held in her hometown. She was away from her family and friends for so long, so she agreed at once. She booked a ticket, and the next day, she prepared everything to leave for her hometown.
Okay.
She took her luggage and booked an Uber for the airport. Her cab was about to arrive in the next 7 minutes, so she waited there until the
Queen,
cab
see that man
arrived.
face.
She went to the cab and shared the OTP to confirm her ride. Later, she loaded her luggage inside the car and jumped in.
Okay.
The driver was wearing a mask and only half of his face was visible to her.
That's what I'm
Even
saying.
then, his face looked a little creepy and he had a huge scar on his face from his right eye to his forehead.
Mm.
It looked like someone cut through his whole face with a sharp object.
Yeah, get up out of
She
there.
was getting some strange vibes, but she had no time to think about such things.
Why not?
So
Just
she
because you
asked
gotta
him to
go don't
move
mean
on.
nothing. I'm sure
He
everybody
started
will
the
rather
car
you
and
get
moved
there
ahead. During the
safely than
whole
fast.
trip, he didn't say anything to her, and neither did she.
Okay.
After driving for continuous 40 minutes, she finally reached the airport, and here came the twist. She paid for her trip and tried to get out of the car, but before she could do anything, several cops came running and surrounded the car while pointing the gun toward her and the driver. She couldn't
Mm-mm.
understand anything. The cops were continuously shouting to get out of the car. She hadn't done anything wrong, so she
Bitch,
had no
get out of the
worries, but
car.
even then, she had a horrifying expression on her face. She put her hand behind her neck and got out of the car. The cops surrounded her and took a few steps away from the car while pointing the gun at my friend's chest. She was so scared, but continuously screaming that she had done nothing and was innocent.
But what
The
about
driver
you?
also faced the same action as
He
her
ain't
and was
saying
taken
none.
just beside her. The cops asked him to remove his mask, and this was the first time she saw his face.
He's gonna be a
His
serial
face was
killer.
creepy even more than when she saw him with the mask.
You got a piece
He
of
was
flesh?
continuously staring at my best friend with his dangerous eyes. She turned her face and stood right there. The cops began searching the car and took her luggage out of the car. They searched every corner of the car, and just beside my friend's luggage, they found a small bag that was not her belongings. Later, they opened each of her luggages and checked it as well. She was watching all her belongings being thrown in the dust, but there was nothing she could have done right then.
At all,
Also,
girl.
this was their duty, and they were bound to do all this. She let them do what they were doing and remained standing there just beside them.
Minding her
They
damn
checked
business.
all her luggage but found nothing suspicious there. But at last, it was the turn of the small bag, which was not hers, so she was completely out of worries as she thought that the bag belonged to the cab driver. The cops opened the bag and found some white packets there. She started
What's that?
thinking what that could have been. Soon she was surprised to hear that the package which they got from the small bag was drugs. She had no idea that the cab driver was that kind of person, but she believed it as his face was already too creepy to prove him a subject in this matter. The cops pulled their guns and pointed toward them. She was in fear, so she screamed that it was not her belongings, but the cab driver might be the one behind all this. But he completely rejected this fact and blamed my friend for everything. He also told the cops that the bag was not his belongings, but she had taken that bag along with his other entire luggage. He tried to act like an innocent who didn't even know the meaning of drugs. She kept on shouting that she was innocent, but the cops took both of them into their
Okay,
custody,
good shit,
as
as long
both
as
of
they
them
got
were
both
the
of them.
suspects, and both of them were blaming each other.
At this
So the
point.
cops took them for interrogation. My friend, who was going to a party celebration with her friend, ended up behind the bars. She was totally confused and horrified because she knew about the police torture. She kept on telling them that she was innocent, but none of them listened. They even took their phones and ID cards so that she couldn't contact anyone. She was in jail with that creepy
no.
driver, who was the main mastermind behind all this. She was there for the next 3 hours, and meanwhile, she tried her best to convince the cops that she was innocent,
And they just
but
ain't
no one
listening.
cared about her. Finally, the cops came to her to listen to her urge, and she explained everything. She told him everything in detail, and she also asked them to confirm her identity if they don't believe her. The cops looked decent, and he believed her and let her talk to her mother. She talked to her and explained everything. Her mother asked her not to cry and wait until she arrived with an advocate.
What? I would've been
She was there
crying.
for the whole night, and due to stress, she couldn't get to sleep the whole night. The next morning, her parents came to her and proved her identity. They also hired an advocate for her who spoke on
Shit.
their behalf, and finally, she was proven innocent. The cab driver was the real culprit, and he had many
Obviously.
other fraud cases charged against him. The cops apologized to her for their mistake and let her go. She went with her parents happy, and the next day, she enjoyed the reunion party with her friends. She
Okay.
forgot everything soon, and then returned to her work. I am her colleague, and after returning from her hometown, she told me everything she experienced. Now she is married and left this country with her husband. It had been so long since she contacted me, and she even changed her contact number. I thought of sharing this story
Nobody should be
today
talking to her.
because this was the same day when she told me this story.
A year anniversary. Girl, just telling someone else's business.
Hey guys, thanks so much for
Hey.
all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Please do. Go hit up our buddy.
This happened
you know,
about a year
his
ago.
husband.
There were so many terrible factors working against me that night. I'm astounded I got away unscathed, at least physically. This all begins when I'm in my friend's apartment who lives in a really rough part of town, in
How
a
you
series
over
of poor
there? I love
decisions.
going places that you know
That
you
night,
just-
I decided to get belligerently drunk, and take a few pills of God knows what. I know. Safe to say, after a solid night of partying around 4 a.m., I was not in the right state of mind. My drug-addled brain decided that instead of staying at either my friend's apartment like I normally would, I wanted to Uber back to my own apartment. My friend's apartment had 2 separate entrances and exits the building, one in the back unlit parking lot of the building and one facing the street. They had 2 sets of keys for each door, and I only had keys to the one in the back of the apartment. Since my Uber would obviously arrive at the streets and the door in the front of the building locks itself behind you, I exited this way when the driver was soon to arrive. Looking back, standing outside that apartment, I realized I looked like the easiest target on the planet. I'm a small petite female in my early 20s, and I can hardly stay upright. I'm using a street lamp to prop myself up and not doing a good job at either. The light was basically a beacon for any nearby predator saying, "Come get me." I'm not paying attention to my surroundings at all in this state, despite the fact that there are literally a bullet hole in the front door I just came out of. Not good. I remembered checking to see what Kara was getting picked up and was only able to pick out the fact that it was a black sedan. Soon, after stepping outside, a black sedan pulls up to the curb and starts rolling down the windows. So I stepped forward. Before this man even spoke, I could feel something was wrong. He had an expression like he was tearing me apart with just his eyes. After seeing that look, it gave me a new meaning to the word predator to describe a criminal, because I then knew what it felt like to be prey. He basically barks at me, "I'm your Uber driver." And this was the second red flag that somehow made its way through my brain.
Uber first person.
Normally, Uber drivers just roll down the window and say your name or any version of that, but always include your name.
Always.
I think I just stared at him for a second, my brain slowly piecing together the situation I was potentially in, and I asked him, "What's my name?" He immediately is enraged and starts screaming about how he doesn't have a frickin' time for this and just get in the effing car, etc., etc.
Boy.
I don't think I've ever been sobered up so fast in my life.
Thank God.
I'm completely panicking. Obviously, this wasn't my Uber.
Obviously.
Quickly checking the license plate, I immediately see it's not a match. Meanwhile, this guy is still screaming at me, and I have absolutely no idea what to do. If I bolt in either direction, this guy could easily outrun me or even have a weapon. I'm also pretty sure at this point that if he's trying to nab a random girl off the street, he must have a weapon of some sort. I can't run back into the apartment door right behind me since it locks behind you, and I don't have the key, nor the time to unlock it. Running towards the back door would do nothing as well, and as he's idling right by the mouth of the driveway towards the back parking lot, and again, I would have to take time to find the right keys and get in.
This is a whole
if I
lot
screamed,
of.
I'm not exactly in the type of neighborhood where someone would try to be a vigilante, and I can still hear the music radiating from my friend's third-floor apartment. I knew they wouldn't hear me. It's also 4 a.m., and absolutely no one is around. People talk a lot on the sub how they either sprint into action or freeze, but I felt incapable of doing either. It was the absolute worst feeling I've ever felt in my life. Everything in me wanted to run, but I felt that if I did, it would be the end of me. But if I kept standing there, staring in shock at the screaming man, the result will be the same. From when he started screaming at me to this point. I'm guessing only 20 seconds had passed. Just as he's looking like he's getting ready to get out of the car, another black sedan pulls up right behind him, checking the license plate as quickly as I can.
That is your Uber.
I realize it's my actual Uber, and I make a full sprint of the car. Really only like 6 steps, and throw myself in screaming at my real Uber driver, "What's my name?" The poor dude looks terrified, but responds with my name quickly, to which I reply, "Get me out of here. That man's trying to kidnap me."
Period.
If I was in his Uber driver's position, I think I would be too shocked to react as quickly as he did. But my dude flew out of there, offered to call the cops for me, which I declined and now regret, and then walked me to the front door of my apartment ensuring I got in safely. Truly an incredible human being. You can rest easy knowing he got the fastest tip my college student bank account would allow for, although he deserved much, much more.
A 21-year-old Samantha Josephson grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey, as the daughter of Seymour and Marcy Josephson. While majoring in political science at the University of Carolina, Samantha studied abroad in Barcelona and planned on attending the Drexel University School of Law after her 2019 graduation. Samantha was a girl who showed boundless potential, who was potentially looking at a partial scholarship to Rutgers, but all her dreams will be snuffed out after making just one fatal mistake. On the evening of March 28, 2019, Samantha went out drinking with friends at the Bird Dog Bar in downtown Columbia. At around 2 a.m., they decided to call it a night, and like so many of us have done before, Samantha pulled out her phone and ordered an Uber. Just 9 minutes later, surveillance footage from the Bird Dog shows a black Chevrolet Impala pulling up outside. Samantha steps outside and enters the vehicle and greets her driver. The man on the wheel was named Nathaniel Rowland, and although he didn't say anything as Samantha climbed into his car, he hadn't actually been expecting a passenger. You see, the car that Samantha had climbed into wasn't her Uber. It was just a similar-looking vehicle she had drunkenly mistaken for her ride. We'd expect from Roland into ultimately telling her to get out of the car, but he didn't. He simply engaged the locks, trapping Samantha inside, and then drove off. It's not clear whether or not Samantha realized her mistake before Roland stopped the vehicle, but at some point, Roland parked up his Impala, pulled out a knife, and inflicted a sustained and savage attack upon the terrified Samantha. Using a bizarre-looking two-bladed knife, Roland proceeded to stab Samantha 120 times. She attempted to shield herself, but she was trapped and Roland was armed, as there were several horrific defensive wounds. Roland also stabbed Josephson in her head with so much force that the knife went through her skull to her brain. A killer blow seems to have come when he stabbed her in her carotid, one of the two main arteries that carry blood to the brain. Samantha also sustained wounds to her face, neck, shoulder, torso, back, long leg, and feet, bleeding out within just 10 to 15 minutes. Roland then dumped Samantha's body into the New Zion field, where she was discovered by a handful of local turkey hunters. The following morning, Samantha's roommate became deeply concerned when they found she hadn't returned home. Police rushed into action, easily tracing her last known whereabouts to the Bird Dog Bar and Nathaniel Roll's black Chevy Impala. Officers later happened to cross Roland while he was out driving, and after a traffic stop was attempted, Roland jumped out of the stationary vehicle and began to flee. Inside his car, police officers found a container of liquid bleach germicidal wipes and a bottle of window cleaner. But perhaps the most incriminating piece of evidence was Samantha's phone, which Roland had foolishly chosen to keep. He was arrested, questioned, and tissue samples were taken. Disturbingly, the tissues under the Roland's nail tested positive for Samantha's DNA, meaning whatever he was doing after he had killed her had been so vigorous enough for the particles of her skin to become embedded under his nails. Roland was charged with Samantha's kidnap and murder, and it became apparent that Samantha's wasn't his first kidnapping victim. He apparently carjacked a woman at a spotlight in October of 2019 and was extremely violent in the commission of the crime, beating her and threatening her before they drove to an ATM to almost empty her bank account. In July of 2021, Roland was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering, with a judge sentencing him to life in prison. The same judge, a veteran of the legal circuit, said that the murder was perhaps the most heartless and severe he had ever seen, denying Roland's request for leniency. It is also not easy to see why Roland displayed such horrifying predatory behavior. When a stranger accidentally climbs into their car, most correct thinking, people simply laugh it off, perhaps getting a little prickly if they're in a bad mood. Roland found a stranger climbing into his back seat, and his first thought were nothing short of bloodthirsty. Samantha Josephson made an honest and simple mistake, and Nathaniel Roland made her pay with her life.
Born in Alberta, Canada in the late 1970s, a young Mark Twitchell dreamed of directing big-budget Hollywood blockbusters. It's only fitting that Mark was born around the same time as the first Star Wars movie was released, as the series became a lifelong passion of his. So much so that in 2007, he actually directed a feature-length fan fiction movie set in the Star Wars universe named Secrets of the Rebellion.
Okay.
The film depicts a series of events that occur just a few days prior to those of the original film, and also happens to include a cameo from Boba Fett actor Jeremy Bulloch. Secrets of the Rebellion was shot in full but remains in post-production and is unlikely to ever see the light of day. The same goes for another short film that Mark tried to make named House of Cards, a horror movie filmed entirely in an Edmonton garage he'd rented. Yet Mark's films are forever doomed to remain in the editing phase because, aside from filmmaking, Mark seemed to foster another passion. It was one that was not only considerably more sinister, but one that would result in him being sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. About the same time that Mark was filming a short horror movie, a 38-year-old factory worker named Johnny Altinger was on top of the world. Having recently dipped his toe back into the dating pool, he was delighted to inform his colleagues that he'd actually managed to bag a date with a woman he'd met on Plenty of Fish. Given that Johnny believed he was well past his sell-by date, we can understand how excited he might be, and how eagerly he might agree to meet a woman he'd only just met online. Johnny's coworkers were happy for him and wished him luck with his budding romance, so much so that when he failed to show up for work one day, and they received an email from his account telling them that he and his date had eloped to Costa Rica, they were incredibly understanding. Sure, it'd take some extra work to cover his shifts, but love is love, and Johnny deserved happiness. Needless to say, Johnny's coworkers were heartbroken when they then received a resignation letter from him via email. They'd missed him, but it sounded like he'd been caught up in something of a whirlwind romance. It was impossible not to be happy for him. The only matter that remained was getting Johnny's forwarding address so his employers could mail his final paycheck to him. But bizarrely, Johnny didn't return their emails, and the likelihood of him being content to miss out on a hefty sum of money seemed extremely slim. Finally, after weeks of waiting and worrying, a handful of Johnny's friends broke into his apartment. They harbored a great deal of suspicion regarding their friend's little Costa Rican vacation and weren't prepared to just sit back and wait for the cops to do something. Yet the break-in only worried them even further when they found Johnny's travel luggage and passport still in his home. To them, it still wasn't entirely clear what was happening yet, but they knew it certainly couldn't be good. Johnny's friends went straight to the Edmonton Police Service with their foreboding collection of evidence, and it wasn't long before a homicide investigation was officially launched. By chance, one of the individuals interviewed in relation to Johnny's disappearance was none other than our wannabe Spielberg, Mark Twitchell.
No way.
It appeared that Johnny had sold his car to Mark at some point in the previous weeks, and this might prove a rather fruitful lead. Mark might well be able to provide them with an insight into Johnny's state of mind, perhaps even recall something Johnny said that might point them in the right direction. The police had no reason to believe that Twitchell was a potential suspect, but they also knew that there was no way Johnny was in Costa Rica, unless he had smuggled himself across the border.
You know, if
So,
he had a passport,
when
so
Mark
why would
mentioned
you do
that Johnny had expressed a desire to take a vacation, the police immediately became suspicious. The inclusion of such an obviously false assertion was enough for the police to arrest Mark Twitchell on Halloween of 2008
That was
as a
definitely like, why
suspect
y'all
in the
talking about
murder
Halloween?
of Johnny Altinger. As part of their investigation of Twitchell's involvement in the disappearance,
Y'all
police
good,
seized and analyzed all of his electronic devices. They hoped to find an incriminating text message, a sinister search history, anything to prove it was Mark who was guilty of the murder. The chances of finding anything were slim, and even then, proving its implications would be another task entirely. So, We can only imagine the pure shock of law enforcement officials when they found a document on Mark's computer that was simply titled Serial Killer Confessions.
Oh, wow.
The opening passage of Serial Killer Confessions read as follows. This story is based on true events. The names and events were altered slightly to protect the guilty. This is the story of my progression into becoming a serial killer. The document went on to present an account of its narrator's planning, failed first attempt, and successful second attempt to lure a man to his garage and murder him, with fake online dating profiles used as bait.
Wow.
It also described the process of dismembering the body and attempts to dispose of the remains. It was a thinly veiled attempt to fictionalize what had evidently been a very real murder, as the account was so horrifyingly detailed that it was quite obviously a retelling of Mark's own experiences of murdering Johnny. Slowly, the truth became horrifyingly clear. Johnny lost his life so that Mark might be able to author a better true crime story. At his trial, Mark attempted to fabricate the idea that he had murdered Johnny in self-defense, and that the serial killer confession document he had authored was merely a coincidence.
Boy.
Yet, he was hard-pressed to explain another document that law enforcement had recovered from his laptop,
What they find?
one which was titled A Profile of a Psychopath. Despite his own insistence to the contrary, the prosecution argued that it was Mark's attempt to deeply analyze his own bizarre behavior and personality.
He got all his
The second document also detailed how, in the days leading up to Johnny's disappearance, Mark had purchased knives, plastic sheeting, saw blades, and a meat cleaver, all in preparation for creating what was described as a kill room in the rented garage. But perhaps the most damning piece of evidence the jury heard was the plot of Mark's short horror movie, House of Cards. They were told that the movie centered around an unfaithful husband, one that was lured to a discreet location under the pretense he was meeting a woman from a dating website. However, once he arrived, he was attacked and killed by a masked man as punishment for his infidelities. Mark hadn't just killed a man so he could write about the process more accurately. He had staged a grim reenactment of his own short film. Once these details emerged, the police were contacted by a man named Gilles Tétrault, a computer company contractor who seemed desperate to talk to them regarding the Mark Twitchell trial. Gilles told investigating officers that he too had been lured to a secluded location under the pretense of meeting a young man named Sheena, whom he'd been flirting with online for the past several days. But when he arrived, he found himself ambushed by a man in a hocket mask who attempted to subdue him with a stun baton. After a violent struggle, Gilles managed to escape, but did not report the attack to police out of sheer embarrassment. It was a clear replication of Mark's modus operandi, and suddenly, it became clear that Gilles was the one Mark mentioned in the first court document, a man the media dubbed the one who got away. As the trial progressed, the prosecution slowly pieced together a picture of who Mark Twitchell really was. A violent, deranged psychopath who masqueraded as a filmmaker, using the art form to recreate violent fantasies that he would later delight in making a reality. The jury had no problem finding him guilty of first-degree murder, and in April of 2011, Mark was given the maximum sentence by Canadian law, life in prison with no parole eligibility for a minimum of 25 years. But even after his imprisonment, grim details of Mark's fascination with murder and dismemberment continued to reach the ears of the public. Apparently, Mark's favorite TV show was Dexter, a series that chronicled the life of Dexter Morgan, a man with homicidal tendencies living a double life.
But he was killing
He works as a
bad
forensic
men.
technician for the police department during the day, but after dark, he continues his work as one of Miami's most prolific serial killers.
But killing...
In May 2013,
bad
it was
men?
reported that Twitchell had purchased a television for his prison cell. Twitchell stated that he had caught up on every Dexter episode that he missed since he was arrested and convicted of first-degree murder.
It's a good show,
Word of Mark's
y'all,
love
but
for
don't
the
you
show
start
was
going for
met
it.
with such revulsion by those that heard it that Dexter's lead actor, Michael C. Hall, was confronted with the news on a live radio show up in Canada.
Okay.
I would hope the people's appreciation was more than some sort of fetishization with the kill scenes, he said. And I wouldn't stop making Dexter because someone like Mark Twitchell was fascinated by it only in that way. I try to tell myself that their fixated nature would have done it one way or the other, but it seems that Dexter had something to do with it.
No
It's
way.
genuinely horrifying. Perhaps Michael C. Hall is correct. Perhaps Mark Twitchell had fostered a fascination with the macabre, and that had long predated his love of Dexter and was bound to hurt someone sooner or later.
Sooner or later.
But there's also little doubt that the violent imagery presented in shows like Dexter have a very particular effect on some people. They act as triggers, making people like Mark want to turn their darkest fantasies into violent, permanent realities.
They always say that, but there's places that have way worse visuals on television, and you don't see those people acting out and nothing. Like, there's places where people see terrible, terrible shit on TV and video games. Their shit is real. And they don't go outside and take that nowhere. That's where it's like we have to stop blaming the stuff that gets put out on television and start blaming the people. You're giving them another excuse. Oh, well, I was watching Dexter. I watched Dexter too. That don't make me want to be like, oh, yes, let me go get some knives. And I love knives. I love knives. For what? For cooking? It ain't nothing to get. Have you ever cut a cucumber with a good ass knife? Skin just come right off. A potato? For those of you that don't use potato peelers, you ever cut a potato with a good ass knife? Like, y'all over here be trying to blame these people. What went on in that house? Where's your mama and daddy at? What was you seeing? You gotta blame the people. Why was this a trigger for you? That man was killing serial killers. Dexter was a serial killer killing other killers. He was a police. Why did you take that little piece? Oh, why'd you take the killing piece? Why didn't you take the good part of it? You know? Like, y'all just don't blame that show. That was a good ass show. That's why you see me going to bat. But let me know which one was your favorite one. I'll say all of these were pretty good. They were good because they weren't that terrible. It wasn't that heart wrenching. That one with Samantha really hurt my heart. But let me know which one was your favorite in the comments, y'all. And until next time, bye.